and bring us all together. And so this is that effort is starting to bear fruit. And I'm looking forward to the third honor conference, which I hope maybe someone here could host at some point and keep this thing going. My talk for today is to do somewhat humbly, to do for honor what Hobbes did for justice. I think it has the advantage of actually being successful, unlike Hobbes, but Hobbes' effort for justice. But we'll see. Honor people are not the best at humility. Am I going to reach? Okay, so my goals are to provide a Hobbesian reconstruction of the agonistic honor ethic. So we'll talk about in more detail what the difference is between agonism and honor more generally. And I'm going to apply agonistic principles to questions of civil discourse. So as I'm not going to spend any time on this, you all know that Hobbes gave us what we could call a rational reconstruction of justice. He gave us an account of what justice is, that justice concerns cooperation for mutual benefit, and a justification or an apology for justice, an explanation of why we would want justice if we didn't already have it, why cooperation for mutual benefit is a good thing, and how it doesn't require you to give up sort of rationality as he understood it, prudential self-interest, and it doesn't necessarily undermine security and order. So he did this by making certain assumptions about what a rational individual would be like, somewhat unrealistic view of human nature, but sort of imaginary person with a certain set of motives placed in an imaginary original position. And so I'm interested in this question of, can we do for honor what Hobbes did? Can we use his strategy for honor, especially since honor is sort of in a primitive stage, right? I mean, honor's, a few hundred years back in development compared to justice, right? So we need to, maybe we could recapitulate some of the stuff that people working on justice did for the sake of honor. So let's talk about motivations. Whereas Hobbes wanted to imagine an individual who was highly individualistic, disinterested, that is to say not particularly interested in harming, but not interested in helping others, and prudential in the sense of interested in maximizing his or her own material well-being, welfare. I'm going to imagine people as being social, highly social, competitive, and competitive for prestige. So I'm going to imagine social. You have to be social if you're competitive, and they're competitive though not for stuff, right? They're not for wealth, but they're competitive for status. So let's imagine people like this, and instead of in an original position where you have no government and scarcity of resources and stuff like that, that none of that stuff matters for agonism. Let's imagine two groups locked in a hate-filled war. So let's imagine individuals, as we stipulated, locked in a war of loathing, where they absolutely loathe the other side. Okay, let's call these the Reds and the Blues. We have examples of this. Here's an example of what that would be like. Some of you might have seen this clip before. It comes from a Palestinian children's program.
الله خلقني وأبدع تكويني وزادني فخرا وجعلني فلسطيني وبث التحدي دما في شراييني ففجرت الثورة حجارة من الطين ورفعت رايات النصر يقيني كتاب الله وسند أشرف المرسلين صرخت بصوت الحق الدفين وأشعلت النار تحت أرجلهم براكيني رفضت خضوع وانكسار جبيني وقبلت ألا أن أموت بشرف طريقيني في أمة قد نست ولاة المسلمين عمر بن الخطاب وصلاح الدين من تحت أزيز الرصاص أغني تحيا أمة الفتح وأبوها النار. أعداء الله أبناء الخنازير أفسدوا وقلعوا أشجار الزيتون والتين، وقتلوا الأطفال بولادة كالثعابين، وقطعوا أسلاعهم بالحجارة والسكاكين، واغتصبوا النساء في الميادين، ودنسوا كتاب الله على الملايين. أين أمة الإسلام؟ أين أمة الإسلام والمجاهدين؟ أين الخافت الله في القدس قد دنست بالصهايين. Bravo, happy.
Okay, yeah, so imagine two groups that feel like this towards each other, okay? If you can. Now, how this might seem to be an inauspicious beginning for getting to where we want with honorable conflict, but I think we can move in a stepwise manner and find out how the sorts of individuals we're imagining placed in this sort of situation would get us to a place of honorable conflict. And step one of that I call intramural competition. So in our hatred of our enemy, we socially elevate those who make the most kills or score the most points against the enemy. All right? And the moral advance here is that we recognize relative excellence, at least among ourselves. So we are not just a horde that's throwing ourselves against another horde. We are starting to rank each other according to how well we kill opponents, right? So, for instance, scalping. There's so many examples of this, but scalping is an example. As long as it was old in the time of Herodotus, where he talks about Scythians who would go around with the scalps of enemies on their weapons and on their saddles and so forth. And the more of these scalps you had, the higher you were esteemed, okay? In a very different way, in Churchill's Finest Hour speech, he's doing the same thing of this intramural ranking. Of course, the last lines of our Finest Hour speech, he says, "Let us therefore brace ourselves so that if the British Empire and its Commonwealth lasts for 1,000 years, men will say this was our finest hour." So in other words, the challenge is, all right, this generation is in competition with other generations of British, let's be high ranked among them. Okay, so now the next step we'll call extramural ranking. Okay, so obviously not all scalps come from equally powerful enemy, right? So if my scalps come from rank and file Greeks, and your scalps come from Ajax and Achilles and so forth, your scalps count for more, right? And that should be accounted for. So because we recognize that not all kills are equally impressive, champions will begin to rank enemies and seek out the highest quality ones they feel they can defeat. And this is a moral advance, because now we are looking across the battlefield and we recognize relative excellence among our enemy. They are no longer just this sort of herd or faceless foe. Now they have to have identities, because you can't rank them unless they have identities. Okay, and if that identity is just the guy with the the red feather, the guy with the 5 feathers, or the whatever it is, we start putting a face on our foes, and we rank them, and which means granting that there's excellence among them, just like there's excellence among us, which also means giving them some sort of credit. Okay. All right. Third step. Here's an example of extramural ranking, the David and Goliath story. So Goliath comes out as champion of the Philistines, challenges the Israelites to bring out their champion. After 40 days, finally, David comes and slays Goliath with his sling. And even as a kid, right, we probably were puzzled by this story. At least I was. This doesn't really seem fair. I didn't know how to think about, was this fair for Goliath? I don't know. He was really big, but David probably won Jerusalem state competition for sling throwing, so I mean, and slings are dangerous. I would be afraid of slings. So I didn't know how to think about, like, was this a fair fight or not when I was a kid? And Malcolm Gladwell has since, the last few years written a book about this. So there's this incommensurability problem between champions. Are they fighting according to the same rules, right? This is problematic. So what we need is extramural coordination, step 3. To address accusations of cheap victories, or I was sick that day, or you had a sling, I didn't know you'd have a sling, and various coordination problems, champions have to create certain rules. So now we send our seconds across the battlefield. Now we parley, we start talking about what are the rules in which govern how we're going to fight. So here we get the first in bello rules of warfare forming, and another moral advance is that we get the gamified warfare that is so characteristic of warrior aristocratic culture, okay, which benefits bystanders to some extent, does moderate warfare to some extent, at least for the aristocrats. So these are a bit of a moral advance, and the Rig Veda is I think it's like 2000 BC. And we see some examples of really gamified, ludic approaches to war. This is an interesting passage when it's speaking to the warrior caste. One should strike another only after giving due notice. A foe engaged with another should never be struck. Likewise, elephants should only oppose elephants. Chariots, cavalry, and infantry only their opposite. Later on it says, if you see two of your side attacking one man, you should go and defend him, even though he's your enemy, right? So extremely, a very, very ludic approach to war. Okay, step 4, we start to have real courtesy develop between the champions on each side. All right, so because of increased elitism and dialogue with enemies turned opponents, right? Now I don't see you as my enemy anymore. Now I see you as my opponent in this sort of game. I see myself as a champion, not as a red. I see you as a champion blue, right? Not just a blue. I start conceiving of myself being more like you, a fellow champion, than seeing myself as seeing myself like a rank and file red. Okay? So just as an Olympian athlete looks at an Olympian from the other countries with more fellow feeling than he or she does, just some, guy off the street in America or something like that who's not an Olympian. He doesn't understand what it means to be an Olympian, doesn't understand the dedication it takes, doesn't understand the excellence, right? This is how, at stage 4 we have. So this is where you start, well, I have a daughter. Who am I going to marry my daughter to? Some rank and file red guy? No, I'm going to marry my daughter to, your son, right? I mean, because, we're champions, right? I mean, that's what's more important, right? And so what we see in this stage is the emergence of mutual respect across the lines, cultural exchange. I start dressing like you. You guys know all these stories, just right? You guys know this from your own research, right? How we start dressing like each other and speaking each other's languages. All these other sort of distinctions, like our racial differences, our religious differences, these start becoming less important than the elitism that we have. All right, and of course, the most romantic version of this is the semi-fictional but semi-factual relationship romance between Saladin and Richard, who never met, but they really did have respect for each other in the midst of a religious crusade. Saladin found fit to send free doctors to Richard when Richard was afflicted. One time Richard's horse was cut out from under him, and Saladin sent him a horse, saying a king shouldn't fight on foot. Richard knighted Saladin's nephew, and Richard offered Saladin's brother Saladin his sister in marriage. Well, he could convert, once the people complained about that. Right, so obviously Richard is not like thinking, he's not, saying, oh, this is some person I can't deal with because he's Muslim. So what Hobbes tried to do was give us a sort of alchemy from the leaden, virtues of, prudence to justice. If you have people who display prudential, who are motivated by prudential self-centeredness, placed in with his state of nature, which is material scarcity, etc. They'll create a government, and that helps establish the circumstances for contractarian justice. What I'm trying to do is say, well, look, what if we took people who are prestige-seeking, placed them in conflict? What will naturally emerge is an aristocracy that creates the circumstances for agonistic honor. Now, this is not how agonistic honor actually developed, just like sentiments of justice didn't actually develop as Hobbes portrays it, and he knew that, right? I mean, we have stories about how strong reciprocal altruism came about in animals, and developing a theory of how agonistic norms develop in humans. This is just a myth that helps illuminate what the function of agonism is. So how does this help us define honor? Well, honor in one sense just means prestige or high rank, okay? This a philosopher would call an axiological sense of honor, okay? Honor as a good. Kind of like pleasure. Pleasure is a good. But some senses of honor, however, connote more than mere prestige, like when we say honorable woman, a man of honor, or we owe something to our honor. So there's some sense that people may deserve honor or are entitled to honor, even if they are not in fact honored, so we all have that idea. So that's honor as a theory of right. So if you think about Frank Stewart's right to respect view of honor, you could say, well, honor in the sense of prestige, yeah, anything that's a prestige culture is an honor culture. Any culture that cares a lot about shame and social standing is going to be honor culture. But they could have very different views about what gives you the right to this, what gives you the right to this respect. It could be sexual purity, it could be wealth, skin color. Hell, it could be I gave more to charity than you did, right? If you went to church, you know how that works. I'm more humble than you are. Agonistic norms are just one theory of what justifies your being on earth, right? So, it's just one among many. Some of you are not interested in agonism, and that's fine. I'm kind of more interested in this. So an agon, as you know, is a Greek term for some competition meant to draw out and prove excellence. And the agon ranks competitors according to their excellence. And that rank doesn't come with any authority or power. It's just medals, it's just applause, it's just sort of social rewards and stuff like that, but not any power. And the goal in agonism is to make sure that the public ranking of excellence, like say this is the ranking of Big 12 football teams, reflects the actual ranking of elements. The norms of agonistic honor are all designed to make sure that this reflects this, just like we are concerned to make sure that the just people actually are, treated justly, and the unjust people are punished and so forth. Okay, so here are some principles of agonistic honor according to me. Rank ambition. One must seek the highest status one deserves, so one must challenge those slightly higher ranked if one thinks one can defeat them. You cannot be humble on agonism because you're distorting the ranking if you are. If you know that you deserve the third best slot, and you're content with the sixth best slot, you're distorting the ranking, not to challenge up, right? So you have to always challenge up if you think you have a shot of moving up. Rank humility, but you mustn't challenge those much higher ranked, and much higher ranked parties cannot accept challenges from those much lower ranked. No ducking, term borrowed from boxing. One must not decline legitimate challenges to one's rank. That one, by the way, is a big difference from authoritarian norms. No bullying, you mustn't aggress upon challenge those of lower rank. Of course, that makes sense. Why would you challenge down? Fair play, competition must be fair. This is also extremely unique to honor as opposed to authoritarian rank. Of course, it has to be fair because fairness is the way we judge excellence. You can't compete only against the honorable, friendly play, and rank respect. You must give and demand respect on the basis of membership in rank and honor group. Okay, so I've provided a Hobbesian reconstruction of agonistic honor and shown how it maybe illuminates the nature of agonism. And then in the last part of the paper, I apply these principles to the question of civil discourse. Do these principles help us at all in a modern pluralistic democracy? And I think, yeah. Obviously, we all know that civil discourse is on the decline by all sorts of measures, okay? This is the "you lied" outburst during Obama's State of the Union just a few years ago. This got some press when the New York Post, the Clintons are, it's their first grandchild, and they post this, party pooper, another liberal crybaby. People are just like, this is a low blow, this is, bad form, this is, you don't do this sort of thing. We know that speakers are being disinvited at unprecedented numbers at universities because of student activist protesters, or, free speech is dying at the university, free inquiry. And so we all know that there's this problem with civil discourse. Now, non-agonistic theories of civil discourse have a diagnosis. They say, look, civil discourse is declining because we're more polarized as a nation than we've ever been. We're further away from each other. And the solution is that we need to get closer to each other. We need to reach consensus through compromise. We need to look at the evidence. We need to be open-minded. All that sort of stuff that you say in Philosophy 101 or Logic 101 classes, or any sort of academic class in the first week about when you deal with contentious issues. And Obama expressed just these views after the Arizona shootings where Gabby Gifford was shot. Agonists, on the other hand, are going to give a different diagnosis and different solution. Civil discourse has declined because the rabble have a bigger voice, because the peasants, the zealots, the non-aristocratic culture grunts, not culture warriors, are having more power, right? So think of like what our founders were debating when they thought about the House versus the Senate. They wanted the Senate to represent a more aristocratic sensibility towards this view. So the agonistic solution isn't that we need to reach consensus, rather we need to teach people to fight culture wars in a sustainable way. So of course agonism, I think, would be appropriate for spaces where conflict is constant and desirable, right? And Jim Leach, who's a former Republican representative from Iowa, has been talking about civil discourse. Here's a quote: "I think America needs an athletic democracy in the sense of people looking at fairness and the sports mentality. There's no good coach and team in America that doesn't begin with hard work and respecting your opponent. After every game, you see two teams put their arms around each other. You don't see that in politics. Sport has come up with a higher ethic than the political ethic. We need to ask ourselves if the vigorous competition in sports can be carried out. Shouldn't we expect the same of our political process?" Well, that's what I'm trying to talk about. So here are some principles that I float and discuss a little bit at the end of the paper. One, don't find ideological disagreement upsetting, unnatural, or immoral. It's a natural state of things, constant culture war. Two, don't expect or desire to convert your ideological opponents. It's the next generation that matters. Don't even want to, because the war would die if your opponents gave up. Third, resist zealots and purists on all sides, including your own. Don't shout down opponents, not because it hampers with free inquiry, which would be the non-agonistic reasons, but because it's cheating. That's the agonistic reading. Don't insult your opponents. Again, not because ad hominems don't reveal the truth, don't really attack the truth of your opponent's argument, but because it is dishonorable, because it's not, it doesn't display courtesy towards your opponents and make the culture war sustainable. And neither an authority nor victim be, which I could only talk too long about. But we all know how this is going on in campuses with microaggression theory, with trigger warning theory. This idea that we have this problem on our campuses where students are playing the victim in order to appeal to authorities to crush their ideological opponents, right? So that's basically just cheating, right? The honorable response to conflict is to summon courage, summon strength, not ever to play the victim. So I think there are profound lessons that agonistic honor can give to civil discourse. But along with non-agonistic views of civil discourse. I'm not saying they're wrong, but this is something that we need in our hip pocket as well. Thank you.